I woke up, and there was a podcast episode on my channel I never recorded. Let that sink in for a second. My channel, my password protected, two-factor authenticated, only accessible by me podcast, had a brand new episode uploaded overnight. It was sitting there, live, ready for my listeners, and the worst part? It already had comments. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming. You know that disorienting blur when you've just come out of sleep, where reality feels like wet paint you could smudge with your thumb. That's what it felt like when I opened my hosting dashboard. The title of the episode was sitting at the top of my feed in bold letters. Episode 34, While You Slept. Episode 34. That wasn't right. My podcast had only reached 33 episodes. I was working on number 34, sure, but it wasn't finished. The draft was still sitting in my laptop, half-edited, with awkward cuts and incomplete sentences. I hadn't recorded the outro. I hadn't mixed the audio. And yet there it was. A full episode, cleanly uploaded, perfectly formatted, even with the show notes written in my style. I clicked it. I shouldn't have. But what else was I going to do? The audio player loaded, and when the first words came out of the speakers, my stomach tightened. It was my voice. No mistake about it. The same intonation, the same subtle rasp when I spoke late at night. But it was wrong. Off. Like someone had dragged a copy of me through a rusted machine and let it out warped. My voice was lower, slower, dragging through syllables like they weighed something. "Welcome back," it said. "You shouldn't be here." The air in my apartment felt colder as I listened. My hands hovered over the keyboard, ready to shut it off, but I didn't, because even though every instinct told me to stop, I couldn't shake the thought that I'd miss something important if I turned away. The comments section didn't help. There were only 3, but each one felt like it had been written in a language I almost understood. Phrases that looked familiar, but broke apart if you stared too long. "I heard you in my house," one said. "The walls remember," said another, and the third just read, "Don't fall asleep again." I wanted to laugh. I actually did let out this sharp, awkward laugh, like if I forced normalcy into the room. It might drive the weirdness out, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Here's the thing, I live alone. I don't share passwords, and I definitely didn't get up in the middle of the night to record a flawless episode without remembering. Still, it was there, uploaded, public, real. And if you think the logical explanation is that I sleep recorded or got hacked, trust me, I thought that too. But you'll see why that doesn't make sense. Because this was only the beginning. Before I get ahead of myself, maybe I should back up a little. Otherwise, all of this probably sounds like some exaggerated creepypasta nonsense. And trust me, I used to laugh at stories like that. But you need to understand the normal side of things before the abnormal makes sense. I run a small horror podcast. Nothing huge, nothing fancy. It started as a side project, something to distract me from a day job that drains my soul more than it pays my bills. My audience is loyal, though. A few thousand people scattered around the world who tune in every week to hear me talk about ghosts, cryptids, urban legends, stuff you'd probably call creepy trivia. The process is exhausting. People think podcasting is just hitting record and telling a story. It's not. It's hours of research, chasing obscure folklore in online forums, then sitting alone in a dim room, talking to a microphone until your throat burns. After that comes the editing, cutting out the breaths, the awkward pauses, the little muttered swears when I mispronounce a word, adding music and effects to make the silence feel haunted. My nights usually look the same. Me hunched over my laptop at 2 in the morning, staring at waveforms that start to blur if I look too long. I'll catch myself leaning too close to the screen, listening for some phantom background noise, then realize I haven't blinked in a full minute. I guess that's the curse of horror podcasters. We spend so much time manufacturing fear that eventually, we start hearing echoes of it in the silence around us. And honestly, I've learned to joke about it. On my show, I'll sometimes tell listeners, if you hear a voice behind me, don't worry, it's just a neighbor. It's a way of disarming that tension. The truth is, I record at night because it's the only time my building is quiet. My neighbors are asleep, the traffic outside has died down, and all you get is the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of the pipes. Perfect ambience. But recording late comes with its own paranoia. Sometimes I'll pause mid-sentence because I swear I hear footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Or I'll take off my headphones and realize the silence is too thick, like it's waiting for me to fill it. And once, a listener messaged me to say, "Hey, I love the show, but who was whispering at the 23-minute mark?" That one still bothers me. I checked the file. I combed through the raw audio. Nothing. Just me. But apparently, they weren't the only one who heard it. 3 other people commented on the same thing. I told myself it was just artifacting, compression playing tricks on their ears. Audio hallucinations, basically. Still it gnawed at me. See, I'm not some tortured genius. I don't drink whiskey straight from the bottle or live in a cabin with red string all over the walls. I'm just a guy with a mic, a beat-up laptop, and too much time on his hands. My life is ordinary enough to be boring. Clock out of work, grab takeout, sit in front of a glowing screen, and talk into the void. That's why the upload shook me so badly, because there wasn't supposed to be mystery in my process. The grind was predictable, mechanical. I chose it that way. The scariest part of my job was worrying whether my internet would drop mid-upload, or if I'd miss my self-imposed deadline. And I guess that's why I didn't see it coming. When something impossible slipped into the routine, it didn't feel like a glitch. It felt intentional, like all those late nights where I talked into the darkness had finally allowed something to talk back. But I'll get there. For now, I need you to picture me in that version of my life, before everything cracked. Imagine a cramped apartment that smells faintly of burnt coffee, headphones clamped too tight on my ears, a cluttered desk with half-empty water bottles and scribbled notes that say things like, "Mention the Jersey Devil," or "Cut coughing fit at 12:04. That was my world. That was the grind. Lonely, yes, but safe. I thought I was in control of every sound that left my mouth and reached the ears of strangers. And then I woke up one morning to find an episode waiting for me. An episode one never made. I hovered over the play button for a long time, debating if I should actually do it. A part of me wanted to just delete the whole thing and pretend it never happened. But another part, the part that's been keeping me up at night since all this began, needed to know, needed to hear it. When I finally pressed play, I braced myself for the sound of silence, or maybe some hacker's idea of a prank. But what came out of my speakers was much worse. It was my voice. Not just similar, not some AI knockoff or cheap impersonation. It was me. My tone, my cadence, the subtle rasp in my throat. But the pacing was off, drawn out in places, clipped in others. Like someone was wearing my voice as a mask, and the mask didn't quite fit. "Welcome back," it said. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. That wasn't how I start my episodes. I have a script, a routine. My openings are always the same cheerful, borderline cheesy intro. "Hey everyone, welcome back to the show where we dive into the weird, the haunted, and the unexplained." But this wasn't cheerful. It was intimate, almost conspiratorial, like it was addressing someone who'd stumbled into the wrong room. I listened in silence as the episode went on. It began like a story, only it wasn't one I recognized. "Last night," the voice said, "you dreamed about the house at the end of the street. The one with the peeling white paint and the broken swing set in the yard. You remember the way the air smelled, don't you? Sweet and heavy, like rotting fruit." My blood ran cold, because I had dreamed about that house, just the night before. A house I hadn't seen since childhood, one I thought I'd forgotten. The voice described it perfectly. The leaning fence, the hollow sound of the porch steps, even the flickering yellow light bulb above the front door. Details I hadn't told anyone, not even myself in years. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence. Generic imagery, maybe. Lots of houses have peeling paint, broken swings, flickering bulbs. But then it went further. In the dream, you heard her voice in the upstairs window. You tried not to look, but you couldn't help it. And when you finally raised your eyes, she was there, smiling. You woke up before she could speak, but she wanted to. She always wants to. I stopped breathing. That was exactly what had happened in my dream. Word for word. There's a kind of horror that isn't loud, isn't flashy. It doesn't rely on jump scares or monsters. It's the quiet horror of being known, being seen too clearly, by something that shouldn't be able to see you at all. That's what this was. The episode went on, narrating fragments of dreams I barely remembered, places I'd been as a child, names I hadn't thought about in decades. My grandmother's house, the one with the floral wallpaper. The basement I swore I'd never go into after the night I heard scratching behind the walls. Even the nightmare I used to have as a kid. The one where my teeth fell out and turned into small, wriggling insects in my hands. I wanted to shut it off. Every second felt like peeling open an old wound. But some part of me couldn't look away. It was like listening to a confession. Only I was the one being confessed to. And then came the part one can barely bring myself to repeat. The voice slowed, dragging each word. You know what's waiting for you. You know why the lights flicker when you're alone. Why you never listen to your own episodes at night. You already know what she's going to say when she finally speaks. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost knocked my laptop off the desk. Who was she? And why did it feel like I did know? Buried somewhere deep in the pit of my stomach. The voice laughed then, a sound that was unmistakably mine but warped, stretched into something inhuman. It was like hearing myself from a nightmare, a mirror that grins when you don't. I slammed the spacebar, cutting it off. The sudden silence was almost worse. My apartment felt heavy, like the air had thickened, pressing against my chest. I sat there staring at the waveform on my screen. The episode was nearly an hour long, and I'd only made it through the first 5 minutes. The cursor blinked at me, daring me to keep going, but I couldn't. Not then. Instead, I scrolled down to the comments again, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The timestamps. All 3 comments mentioned different moments in the episode. 32 minutes in, 47, 58, all parts one hadn't reached yet, which meant they'd already listened through the whole thing. Listeners out there knew things about this recording, about me, that I hadn't even heard yet. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick, that someone was gaslighting me, manipulating the file, but that nagging voice inside me whispered the truth. The only way to know for sure was to listen to the rest. And against my better judgment, I knew I would. Not yet, but soon. Because if it really was my voice, then what else did I say? The moment I shut the episode off, I did what any rational person would do. I opened the back end of my podcast hosting service. If this was some kind of hack, I'd find proof. Maybe some kid on Reddit had figured out my password and thought it would be funny to mess with me. But the more I looked, the less sense it made. The episode was listed as published at 2:59 a.m. I was asleep at that time, I know, because I'd finally forced myself to bed around 1:30. My laptop had been closed, my mic unplugged, and unless I'd suddenly learned to sleepwalk and edit like a professional, there was no way I could have uploaded anything in that state. I checked the file details. Normally, when I upload, the file name is something sloppy, like ep34_draft3_final_really final.mp3. This one, it was just labeled 034. Perfectly neat. Too neat. Like whoever, or whatever, had made it knew exactly how I should have labeled it if I'd been more disciplined. The hosting site showed the usual technical info, bitrate, file size, upload IP, and that's when I felt my stomach drop. The IP address wasn't foreign. It wasn't some weird proxy bouncing across countries. No, it traced back to my own home router. My connection. My apartment. I refreshed the page, convinced it was a glitch, but it didn't change. According to the logs, I had uploaded the file at 2:59 a.m. from inside my own home. I grabbed my phone and checked my activity history. No calls, no texts, no alarms going off. Just the same empty void a normal night leaves behind. My Wi-Fi log confirmed there'd been no unusual devices connected. And yet, the hosting service's record was clear. I had done it. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, trying to convince myself I'd misread something. Maybe I'd stayed up later than I thought. Maybe I'd blacked out and recorded in some weird fugue state. But the more I thought about it, the less it added up. Editing takes time. Uploading takes time. Writing detailed show notes takes a lot of time. The episode wasn't rough or sloppy, it was polished. I couldn't have done all that in my sleep. And then I saw something even stranger. Future episodes. In my publishing dashboard, there were 4 additional uploads listed as scheduled. No titles, just numbered files. 035.mp3, 036.mp3, 037.mp3, 038.mp3. Each one had a release date set weeks in advance, just like I normally scheduled my real episodes. Only these weren't my files. I clicked one of them, but the system gave me a locked message. Scheduled, not available for playback until release. I tried again with another. Same thing. They were sealed, hidden, like someone had placed them there and set a timer. My pulse was pounding in my ears. Whoever, or whatever, was doing this wasn't just messing with me. They had a plan, a schedule. I called the hosting company, desperate for some kind of human explanation. After 15 minutes of hold music, a tired voice answered. Yeah, I said, trying not to sound insane. There's been some kind of mistake. My account shows episodes uploaded that I didn't put there. The rep asked for my details, clicked away at their keyboard, and then said the words I was dreading. It looks like they came for your account, sir. Your IP, your login credentials, everything checks out. No, I said. That's impossible. I didn't upload them. Silence. Then, in that polite customer service tone, they asked, "Are you sure you didn't forget?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I hung up. The apartment felt darker now, like the shadows had crept closer while I was distracted. I pulled my curtains shut, though I didn't know what I thought that would accomplish. I stared at the scheduled episodes again. My finger hovered over the delete button, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. What if they just reappeared? What if deleting them made things worse? My brain kept circling the same thought. If episode 34 was about my dreams, what are the others going to be about? And the worst part, I already knew I wouldn't be able to stop myself from listening when they dropped. Because somewhere deep down, I had this horrible certainty that they weren't just stories. They were warnings, or maybe predictions, and I wasn't ready to know which. I told myself I wouldn't do it. I told myself I'd delete the files, cancel the whole damn podcast if I had to, and move on with my life. But that resolve lasted about 2 days, because 2 days later, episode 035 unlocked. It appeared in my feed at midnight sharp. I stared at it on my phone screen, thumb hovering just above the play button. The title was blank this time, just episode 35. No description, no show notes, no tags. Just an empty placeholder, as if the file didn't want to be categorized. I should have left it alone, but if you've been listening this far, you know I didn't. Curiosity is stronger than fear. And besides, if people out there were already hearing these episodes, I couldn't just let them know things about me that I didn't. So I pressed play. The opening silence lasted longer than usual. 10 seconds. 15. Just dead air. I thought maybe the file was broken. And then I heard it, the faint scrape of something, like nails dragging across the surface. My pulse quickened. Then my voice came in. Only this time, it wasn't even pretending to sound like me. It was warped, distorted, as if recorded underwater and played through a broken speaker. Words stretched, then snapped, syllables collapsing in on themselves. You shouldn't have come back. I froze. The hair on my arm stood up, but the voice didn't stop. I know you're listening. Right now. I know where you're sitting. How your chest tightens when I speak. You look at the door every few seconds, don't you? Wondering if someone is standing on the other side. I did. I had. And the realization made my stomach lurch. This wasn't narrating my dreams anymore. This was narrating the present. Me in real time, listening. The whispers started next. Layers of them, faint and chaotic, curling beneath the main voice like snakes in tall grass. At first I thought it was gibberish, just noise. But then one phrase cut through. Closer. Another whispered. Behind you. I ripped my headphones off, heart hammering. My apartment was silent, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt crowded, like the shadows themselves were holding their breath, waiting. After a long pause, I forced the headphones back on. I could not finish. The episode continued. Do you remember the night you woke to the sound of the windows sliding open? You thought it was a dream. It wasn't. You saw the figure in the corner, didn't you? You pretended to sleep. That's when I first started speaking. I swallowed hard. because I had dreamed about that years ago in my old apartment. The sliding window, the figure in the corner. I'd written it off as sleep paralysis, but now, hearing it spoken back to me in my own twisted voice, I wasn't so sure. The whispers grew louder, overlapping. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Each one seemed to lean closer, pressing into my ears, my skull, until I could barely make out the main voice anymore. And then, as suddenly as they began, they stopped. There was silence. Then, "Don't look at the screen." I froze, staring at my laptop screen where the waveform was playing. "Stop. Don't look at me while I speak. Look away." My mouth went dry. Against every instinct, I turned my head, staring at the dark corner of my room instead of the screen. "Better," the voice said, and I swear it sounded pleased. The episode ended with the sound of breathing, long, drawn-out breaths that weren't mine. They faded slowly, leaving me shaking, sitting in the dim glow of my monitor. When it was finally over, I checked the comments section again. Dozens of new ones had appeared. I heard my name. "Why did you describe my living room?" Did anyone else hear the voice say tomorrow? It wasn't just me. Listeners everywhere were being targeted, spoken to directly, and each one seemed to have heard something different. A personalized message. That was the moment I realized this wasn't my podcast anymore. Whatever was uploading these files wasn't just using my voice. It was using my platform as a way in, and I couldn't stop it. The next file was already waiting. Episode 036. After episode 35, sleep stopped feeling like a refuge. It felt like an ambush. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined waking to another upload, another hour of my voice saying things I couldn't remember. So I decided to fight back. I bought a cheap security camera online, the kind marketed to paranoid parents and overcautious pet owners. It had night vision, motion detection, a little red light that winked at me like it knew a secret. I mounted it in the corner of my bedroom, angled so it could see both me and the door. If I was sleepwalking, it would catch me. If someone else was coming in to record me, it would catch that too. I also downloaded one of those sleep tracking apps. It records snoring, movements, even those weird mumbles people make at 3 a.m. I figured if I was talking in my sleep, if somehow my dreams were leaking out, I'd at least have evidence. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The camera footage showed me tossing, turning, lying stiff as a corpse under the covers. The audio logs caught a few sighs, a few restless movements, but no speech, no footsteps, no sliding windows or whispered names. But the morning of the 4th day, when I opened the app, the file was gone. The night log just wasn't there. No error message, no corrupted file icon, just a blank space where the recording should have been. The camera wasn't any better. Instead of footage, I got a frozen still frame of me sleeping. Timestamp 2:59 a.m., the exact time the first episode had uploaded. The red light on the camera was still on, but the video wouldn't play. I felt my stomach knot. I sent a screenshot of the frozen frame to my friend Caleb. He's one of the few people who actually knows about my podcast beyond being a listener. We'd gone to college together. He's the kind of guy who thinks everything has a rational explanation if you just dig deep enough. "Dude," I texted, "look at this." The footage stopped at the exact time the episode went up. He called me immediately. "All right," he said. "You're either getting hacked or your equipment's garbage. I'll come over tonight. We'll run a proper test." When Caleb arrived, he brought his own gear, an old camcorder, a digital recorder, even a couple of battery-powered lights, so we wouldn't be relying on my power. "If this is real," he said, setting up the camcorder on a tripod, "we'll catch it." We set everything up like a low-budget ghost hunting show. Camcorder aimed at my bed, audio recorder on the nightstand, my phone propped up against a lamp with the sleep app running. We even wrote the current time on a piece of paper and held it up to the camera, like hostages proving we were still alive. I tried to laugh about it, but my mouth was dry. "If I start speaking in Latin or something," I said, "wake me up." "You got it," Caleb said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, I slept badly, half waking every hour, aware of the camera staring at me. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of static, white noise, a woman's silhouette standing just outside the reach of the light. She whispered something I couldn't hear, but I felt it vibrate inside my skull. I woke up gasping at 3:12 a.m., heart hammering. Caleb was asleep on the couch, headphones still on. The equipment lights glowed steadily. Nothing seemed wrong. In the morning, I checked the recordings. The camcorder had shut off at 2:59 a.m. exactly. The file ended abruptly mid-frame. The audio recorder was blank, not corrupted blank, as if nothing had been recorded at all. Caleb scrolled through the files, frowning. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "Everything had power. Everything was running. It's like..." He trailed off. "Like what?" I asked. "Like something didn't want to be seen," he said quietly. The sleep app on my phone did have a file this time, but when I played it, it wasn't my breathing. It wasn't silence either. It was a low, distorted hum, like someone dragging a bow across a cello string underwater. Beneath it, faint but unmistakable, were whispers. Not words, names. I couldn't make them all out, but one was mine. Another was Caleb's. We looked at each other, neither of us speaking. "You're messing with me," I finally said, though my voice cracked. "This is some kind of prank." Caleb shook his head. "I don't even know how I'd fake this." That night, he didn't stay over. He said he had work in the morning, but I could tell he just didn't want to sleep here again. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the equipment, at the files that refused to exist. I thought about deleting the podcast, shutting it all down, but the idea felt pointless. Whatever this was, it wasn't living in my RSS feed or my hosting dashboard. It was living in me. And when I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of the woman again. Only this time she was closer, her lips almost at my ear. "You're recording this," she whispered. "Right now." I woke up with a jolt. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another episode had uploaded. I told myself I wouldn't open it, that whatever appeared in my feed this time would stay there, untouched, unplayed. But the thing about fear is that it's sticky. It clings to you, nags at you, makes silence unbearable. And so, 2 nights later, at 3 a.m. sharp, another episode appeared, number 037. No title, no notes, just the file. This time, I didn't press play. Instead, I went back to the camcorder Caleb had set up, the one that had died at 2:59 a.m. I pulled the SD card out, slotted it into my laptop, and searched every directory. At first, it looked empty. The final video ended mid-frame, just like before. But tucked away, buried in a hidden folder with no name, was another file. Not an MP4, not a format I recognized at all. Just a string of symbols for a file name. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The video player flickered, glitched, then somehow began to play. And I saw myself. Not sleeping, not tossing under the covers, but sitting upright in bed, perfectly still, eyes wide open. The timestamp read 3:04 a.m. For a long stretch, I just stared into the lens. My expression was wrong. Not blank, not vacant, more like waiting. Like the way a teacher waits for the class to quiet down before beginning. Then I spoke. It wasn't the warped, underwater distortion of the earlier episodes. It was crisp, clear. My exact cadence. My exact tone. Only the words weren't mine. 3 cars on Route 17. The other me said calmly. A red one, a black one, and a silver truck. At 6:12 in the morning. The truck won't stop. They won't all make it home. My blood ran cold, because I'd seen a news alert 2 days earlier about a 3-car pileup on Route 17. The details matched exactly, down to the colors of the vehicles. On screen, my other self blinked slowly, then continued. The basement at St. Paul's. Water rising fast. Children screaming. Not all the names will be printed. I paused the video, heart hammering. I pulled up my browser, searched frantically. It didn't take long to find it. 2 weeks ago, during an unseasonal storm, the basement of St. Paul's Community Center had flooded during a children's event. Some kids had been rescued, but not all. I sat frozen, my face, my voice, predicting tragedies that had already happened. Shaking, I pressed play again. Train 492, the other me said softly. Engine failure before the bridge. Too much weight. No time to brake. It will feel like flying before it feels like drowning. The camera caught my lips curling into the faintest of smiles, as if savoring the words. I yanked my headphones off, while rising in my throat. My own voice had become unbearable, but the compulsion to keep listening was stronger. I put the headphones back on, hands trembling. "You wonder if you're cursed," the other me whispered. "If you're leaking the future in your sleep. But you're not dreaming. You're delivering. Every word you give them binds you closer." I couldn't breathe, because as the recording spoke, I remembered something. A half-dream I'd had months ago, of a train groaning across a bridge, the water glittering below, the sensation of tilting forward, weightless. I had woken in a cold sweat, convinced it was just a nightmare. But here I was, watching myself describe it as if reading from a script. The video flickered, glitched into static. Then the screen cut to black, though the audio continued. Whispers, hundreds of them, overlapping like the sound of a crowded room. Then, above them, my voice again. "I'll prove it to you. Look at tomorrow's paper. The obituaries. Count the names. They match the ones I whispered last night." The whispers rose, fevered, impossible to follow. And then, clear as a knife against glass. "You're next." The file ended. I sat there for hours, staring at the blank screen, too afraid to close the laptop. My reflection in the darkened monitor looked like a stranger. The next morning, I bought a paper. My hands shook as I flipped to the obituaries. There were 3 names I recognized, because I had heard them, faintly, in the whispers. People I'd never met. People from towns I'd never been to. And yet there they were, dead. I felt the walls of my apartment closing in. I wanted to scream, to run outside, to burn every piece of equipment I owned. But I couldn't, because something inside me whispered that the moment I stopped listening, the moment I stopped knowing, things would get worse. So I replayed the file, over and over, cataloging every word, every pause, every cryptic phrase. And the more I listened, the more a terrible realization sank in. This wasn't just prophecy. It was instruction. My other self wasn't warning me of what was to come. He was delivering it, speaking it into existence. Each episode wasn't a recording of the future. It was a creation of it. And if that was true, then the tragedies weren't random at all. They were broadcasts, scripts, stories written in my own voice, pulling real people into their endings. By the 5th replay, I noticed something else, something I hadn't caught before. At the very end of the file, almost beneath the threshold of hearing, a final phrase slipped through the static. It was my voice again, low and certain. "Turn the camera back on." I thought it was just me, that I was the center of this infection, the sole host for whatever had started bleeding into my recordings. But it didn't take long for the audience to notice. At first, the comments seemed normal, typical engagement stuff. "Great episode. This one creeped me out more than usual." Or, "Man, your voice was super distorted this time." I almost let it slide. Distorted? Sure, maybe their headphones were cheap. Maybe their internet connection was bad. But then one comment caught my eye. "Hey," it read. "Was anyone else freaked out when he said my name?" I froze, because the name in question wasn't mine. It was the username of the commenter. At first, I thought it was a joke, a kind of ARG-style roleplay fans sometimes do. But within hours, other comments appeared. He said my name too. Wait, I thought I imagined that. He was whispering about my town. I heard an entirely different story. Mine was about a fire. Did anyone else get that one? That was the moment my stomach dropped, because they weren't talking about an episode I'd uploaded. They were talking about different versions of it. I checked the hosting feed. Only one file was there. Episode 038. Just one version. And yet my inbox filled with messages from listeners swearing they'd heard unique recordings. One listener emailed me directly. "I don't know how you did it, but that episode predicted my uncle's accident. He fell from a ladder yesterday. The audio said it was going to happen. Word for word." Another wrote, "Not cool, man. Not funny. Don't say things about my little sister like that. Don't." I didn't even know what they were talking about. The strangest part? When I tried to download my own episode, the one sitting in my official feed, the audio was blank. Silence. But for them, it wasn't. Comments turned into theories. Fans argued with each other, swearing their versions were real, accusing others of lying for attention. Some claimed the episode cut off halfway through, replaced by whispers. Others said it went on for over 2 hours, detailing accidents that hadn't happened yet. One Reddit thread blew up with dozens of people insisting they had different versions of the same episode, each tailored to them personally. One guy even transcribed what he'd heard, a monologue in my voice describing the exact floor plan of his house, down to the squeaky stair by the kitchen. I read it 3 times, pulse thudding in my ears. I'd never been to his house. I didn't know him, but his post got upvoted hundreds of times, with replies saying things like, "He did that to me too. How is this possible?" Some of my listeners stopped joking. Some stopped listening altogether. A few left terrified comments. "Please stop uploading. I don't want to hear this anymore. Whatever's going on, it's dangerous." And then there were the ones who leaned in, the ones who wanted more. They started begging for their episodes, refreshing my feed constantly, leaving comments like, "When's the next prophecy dropping?" or "Do me next." It made me sick, because I realized this thing, whatever it was, had outgrown me. I wasn't just the host anymore. The audience had become infected. Every listener who tuned in was hearing something different, something personal, like the recording was writing itself inside their heads. I wanted to tell them to stop, to unsubscribe, to delete their files, to run. But some part of me knew it wouldn't matter. The episodes weren't limited to RSS feeds and MP3s anymore. They had slipped past the boundaries of code and storage. They were in the act of listening itself. And once you'd heard them, once they'd spoken in your ear, you were part of it. The worst part, late one night, scrolling through the chaos of comments and emails, I found a post that made my chest lock up. It wasn't from a stranger. It was from Caleb. He said my name too. I told myself I wouldn't listen, that whatever waited in the feed this time, episode 040, the one that appeared marked finale, would stay untouched. I swore I'd delete it, walk away, erase everything. But you already know I didn't, because here I am. And that means I pressed play. The audio began with silence, a heavy silence that felt almost staged, like the pause before a curtain rises. Then my voice spoke, calm, measured, almost kind. "By now," it said, "you've realized this was never about the podcast." I froze. It continued. "You've told them everything. About the uploads you don't remember, the impossible metadata, the whispers in your sleep. You've told them about Caleb, about the listeners who started hearing their own versions. You've told them more than you should have." My heart thudded, because it wasn't wrong. That's exactly what I'd been doing, sitting here, confessing, stitching together the story for anyone willing to listen. "You think you're warning them," the voice said, "but you're only narrating the script that was already written. Every word you speak is another nail in the frame. You don't escape by telling the story. You build the cage." The recording laughed, low and breathy, my laugh, and then it said something that made my skin crawl. "You've even told them the title, the podcast episode that was uploaded in my sleep." I ripped the headphones off, chest tight, sweat chilling on my skin. But even without them, the words seemed to linger in the room, vibrating against the walls, crawling into the corners. I sat there for a long time, staring at the play button, the progress bar creeping forward. And finally, against every instinct, I put the headphones back on, because I had to know how it ended. The final minutes weren't loud or dramatic. They weren't filled with screams or glitches or whispers. They were simple. My voice steady, unshaken, narrating everything I've just told you, almost word for word. It described the cold open, the ordinary nights of recording, the first impossible upload, the distorted dreams, the lost tapes, the audience involvement, even this, me, right now, confessing to you, trying to thread sense through the madness. And then, right at the very end, it dropped to a whisper. "This is where you stop. For now." The audio cut out. File complete. But here's the part one can't shake. When I checked the file properties, I noticed something strange. The date created wasn't tonight. It wasn't even this week. It was marked from months ago, before any of this started. I don't know what that means. Maybe it means I was always going to end up here. Maybe it means there was never a choice. Or maybe it means this isn't the final episode at all. Maybe it's just a checkpoint, a pause. The loop always leaves room to restart. And if that's true, then what happens next isn't up to me. It's up to you. Because you've listened. You've followed every word. And somewhere out there, right now, a new file is waiting for you. Just check your feed.